If you enjoyed this audiobook, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. Chapter 1: Why Teams Stay Silent. Part 1: When Smart People Stop Speaking Up. The most brilliant engineer at Northrop Grumman had serious doubts about the Mars Climate Orbiter's navigation system. During design reviews in 1998, she noticed the software calculations felt wrong, but stayed quiet. The project had momentum. Her manager seemed confident. Other team members nodded along during presentations. Speaking up would mean admitting she wasn't 100% certain of her concerns. And in aerospace engineering, uncertainty signals incompetence. 9 months later, NASA lost a $125 million spacecraft because the navigation team used imperial units, while the engineering team used metric. The engineer's instincts were correct. Her silence cost more than a Mars mission. It demonstrated how fear masquerades as professionalism. This pattern repeats daily in conference rooms worldwide. Doctors hesitate to question treatment protocols during patient rounds. Software developers watch flawed code ship despite knowing it will crash under load. Marketing teams launch campaigns they privately believe will fail. The smarter the team, the more pronounced this paradox becomes. Amy Edmondson's research at Harvard Business School reveals that teams with higher cognitive ability often perform worse than expected. Why? Intelligence creates additional pressure to appear competent. When brilliant people aren't sure, they experience more shame than average performers who regularly operate in uncertainty. Consider Microsoft's Windows Vista development. Multiple engineers identified performance issues early in development, but stayed quiet during team meetings. Vista eventually launched 3 years behind schedule with poor reception. Post-project interviews revealed that dozens of developers had privately shared similar concerns, but felt speaking up would label them as complainers or showstoppers. The silence isn't laziness or disengagement. It's rational self-preservation. Past experiences teach people that challenging ideas carries professional risk. Sarah, a pharmaceutical researcher, learned this lesson when she questioned drug trial methodology during her first project meeting. Her supervisor later told colleagues she was difficult to work with. Sarah now saves concerns for private conversations that rarely influence decisions. Organizations create these invisible barriers through subtle cultural cues. The leader who says they want honest feedback but visibly tenses when receiving it. The meeting format that only allows prepared presentations, never spontaneous questions. The performance review process that rewards confidence over curiosity. When smart people stop speaking up, teams lose their most valuable asset, the ability to catch problems before they become disasters. Part 2: The real cost of playing it safe. Playing it safe feels smart until you see the bill. A marketing team at Nokia watched Apple grab their smartphone market share because critical design concerns never reached decision-makers. The numbers tell a stark story. Companies with low psychological safety spend 27% more time fixing preventable problems, according to Edmondson's research. When engineers at Theranos raised concerns about blood testing accuracy, they were silenced. The result? A company valued at $9 billion collapsed into worthless stock and criminal charges. Had Elizabeth Holmes created space for challenge instead of demanding loyalty, those early warnings could have saved the company. Consider the hidden math of silence. Every unspoken concern about a product flaw multiplies into customer service calls, warranty claims, and brand damage. Toyota learned this lesson painfully during their 2009 recall crisis. Engineers knew about acceleration problems, but felt unsafe raising concerns that might embarrass leadership. The eventual recall cost $2 billion and damaged decades of reputation building. The talent drain hits hardest. Google's Project Aristotle found that their highest-performing teams weren't filled with the smartest individuals, but with people who felt safe speaking up. When brilliant minds stay quiet, they eventually leave. A senior developer at a major bank told me she changed jobs not for money, but because her ideas consistently died in meetings where only senior voices mattered. Performance theater becomes expensive. Teams spend hours polishing presentations instead of solving problems. At Wells Fargo, employees created millions of fake accounts rather than admit they couldn't meet impossible sales targets. The cleanup cost exceeded $3 billion in fines alone. Leaders often mistake quiet rooms for aligned teams. When NASA's Challenger shuttle exploded, engineers had repeatedly warned about O-ring failures in cold weather. Their concerns were systematically dismissed by management focused on launch schedules. 7 lives and billions of dollars lost because descent felt dangerous. The compound effect accelerates over time. Problems that could be fixed with a conversation in month 1 require major overhauls by month 12. Software teams at failed startups consistently report the same pattern. Small technical debt issues that nobody felt safe discussing eventually required complete system rewrites. Smart companies measure these costs differently. They track metrics like time to surface problems and idea to implementation cycles. The teams that speak up fastest also ship fastest, adapt quickest, and keep their best people longest. Part 3. Fear disguised as professionalism. What looks like pristine professionalism often masks deep-seated fear that paralyzes even the brightest teams. The Monday morning leadership meeting at WeWork in 2018 exemplified this perfectly. Executives sat around polished conference tables, discussing ambitious expansion plans, while privately harboring serious concerns about cash flow and business model sustainability. The culture demanded unwavering confidence and solution-oriented thinking. Raising concerns without fully formed alternatives felt unprofessional. The company rhetoric emphasized hustle and crushing it, making doubt appear weak rather than wise. This performance theater happens in organizations everywhere. Teams invest enormous energy managing impressions rather than solving problems. Engineers at Boeing knew about software issues with the 737 MAX, but felt pressure to present solutions rather than raise concerns. The cultural expectation was clear: come prepared, speak confidently, or stay quiet. Questioning established approaches seemed like undermining leadership rather than protecting passengers. The proper channels phenomenon creates another layer of fear dressed as process. At Theranos, employees were told to raise concerns through official reporting structures rather than discussing issues openly. This seemingly reasonable professional standard ensured that critical information never reached decision-makers in time. The emphasis on following protocol became a mechanism for suppressing inconvenient truths. Different hierarchical levels experience this fear differently. Junior employees like entry-level consultants at McKinsey fear appearing incompetent when they notice flawed assumptions in client presentations. They've learned that questioning senior partners' logic can be career-limiting, so they polish their poker faces instead. Mid-level managers fear undermining their authority by admitting uncertainty. A product manager at Google might privately question a feature's user value but publicly champion it to maintain credibility with their team. Senior leaders face the most complex fear patterns. They worry that admitting uncertainty will undermine confidence throughout the organization. CEO Reed Hastings of Netflix learned this lesson when early transparent communication about strategic pivots initially created panic rather than alignment. The pressure to project certainty becomes overwhelming, even when genuine uncertainty would better serve decision-making. The real conversations happen afterward in parking lots and private messages. Teams develop shadow communication networks because formal channels feel unsafe. This doubles the work, managing official narratives while conducting actual problem-solving through back channels. The exhausting performance of appearing confident while genuinely uncertain burns out even the most resilient professionals. What gets labeled as high standards or executive presence frequently functions as fear-based filtering systems. These standards determine which voices, perspectives, and ideas feel welcome. The result is sophisticated teams that look polished on the surface while critical insights remain buried under layers of professional politeness. Part 4. What happens when no one challenges the room? When teams stop challenging each other, something dangerous happens. The smartest people in the room begin making their biggest mistakes with complete confidence. Organizations slowly drift from excellence toward mediocrity, and nobody notices because everybody agrees. The Challenger disaster provides a haunting example. Engineers at Morton Thiokol knew the O-rings would fail in cold weather. They had data, experience, and deep technical knowledge. Yet when senior leaders pushed for launch approval, the engineers eventually backed down. Roger Boisjoli, who understood the risks better than anyone, later described watching his concerns get filtered out layer by layer. The team that should have been arguing was nodding instead. This pattern repeats constantly in corporate settings, though usually with less dramatic consequences. Marketing teams approve campaigns they privately question. Development teams ship products with known flaws. Strategic decisions move forward based on assumptions nobody dares to test. The absence of challenge gets misinterpreted as alignment when it actually signals dysfunction. Research by Amy Edmondson shows that high-performing teams have more disagreement, not less. They argue about ideas while supporting each other as people. But when teams lose the capacity for productive conflict, they develop what researchers call false consensus. Everyone appears to agree because dissent feels too risky. This creates a vicious cycle. Leaders interpret silence as buy-in and become more confident in questionable decisions. Team members see this confidence and assume their concerns must be wrong. The group becomes increasingly certain about increasingly fragile assumptions. Groupthink emerges not from stupidity, but from safety concerns that make smart people defer to authority instead of contributing their expertise. The absence of healthy challenge forces unhealthy conflict underground. Instead of debating ideas openly, teams develop factions. Instead of addressing problems directly, people complain privately. The energy that could improve decisions, it's channeled into managing impressions and avoiding blame. Organizations that lose their capacity for internal challenge become vulnerable to external surprises. Competitors who encourage debate move faster. Markets that reward innovation leave consensus-focused teams behind. The very harmony that feels safe gradually undermines the team's ability to adapt and excel. When nobody challenges the room stops improving. Excellence requires continuous pressure testing of ideas through respectful disagreement. Teams that prioritize comfort over truth eventually discover that avoiding short-term discomfort creates long-term danger. The question becomes whether organizations can create enough safety for people to risk being wrong in service of getting things right. Chapter 2. The Foundation. Building Real Trust. Part 1. Trust is not about being nice. Most teams mistake being polite for being trustworthy, creating environments where everyone smiles but nobody speaks up. Watch any corporate meeting and you'll see this pattern. Everyone nods agreeably. No one interrupts. People use phrases like, "I appreciate your perspective," before disagreeing so softly it barely registers. The meeting ends with artificial harmony. But the real conversations happen in parking lots afterward. This isn't trust. This is performance theater. Patrick Lencioni spent years studying why intelligent teams make terrible decisions together. He discovered that most dysfunction stems from a fundamental misunderstanding about trust itself. We think trust means people are nice to each other and follow through on commitments. That's predictability-based trust, essentially trusting someone's competence and consistency. But teams need something deeper, vulnerability-based trust. This means team members feel safe being completely themselves, admitting what they don't know, asking for help, acknowledging the stakes, and challenging ideas without fear of social punishment. Consider Ray Dalio's approach at Bridgewater Associates. His radical transparency policy encourages employees to criticize anyone, including Dalio himself, in real time during meetings. While extreme, this created an environment where hiding weaknesses was more dangerous than exposing them. The result? one of history's most successful hedge funds. Traditional professionalism often blocks this vulnerability. We're taught to project competence, avoid admitting uncertainty, and maintain cordial relationships above all else. But when everyone protects their image, teams can't access their collective intelligence. Amy Edmondson's research at Harvard revealed the difference between teams that trust each other's abilities versus teams that trust each other's intentions. The first creates efficient execution. The second creates breakthrough innovation. Vulnerability-based trust develops through small, consistent actions. When a leader says, "I don't understand this financial model, can someone walk me through it?" Rather than pretending comprehension, team members learn it's safe to admit confusion. When someone acknowledges, "I'm struggling with this deadline," instead of suffering silently, colleagues offer help before crisis hits. This doesn't require trust falls or extensive team-building retreats. Trust builds through character demonstrated in everyday moments, not credentials displayed in conference rooms. Part 2. The Vulnerability Experiment. Most leaders try vulnerability once, feel exposed, and retreat to the safety of authority. This immediate pullback kills trust before it has a chance to grow. The secret lies in treating vulnerability as an experiment rather than a personality overhaul. Reid Hoffman, LinkedIn's founder, regularly admits knowledge gaps in board meetings. When discussing new market opportunities, he'll say, "I don't understand this space well enough yet. Who can help me think through this?" This admission doesn't diminish his credibility, it increases it. Board members see a leader secure enough to prioritize learning over appearing omniscient. The vulnerability loop works like a permission structure. When one person admits uncertainty, others feel safe doing the same. At Bridgewater Associates, Ray Dalio built this into company culture through radical transparency. Employees regularly acknowledge mistakes in company-wide emails, creating an environment where problems surface quickly instead of festering in silence. Start with low-stakes admissions. Instead of pretending to understand technical jargon, ask for clarification. Rather than nodding through confusing presentations, say, "I'm lost. Can you back up and explain that differently?" These small moments teach your team that confusion isn't shameful. The key is calibrating appropriately. Sharing that you're struggling with a strategic decision invites helpful input. Sharing personal financial troubles crosses professional boundaries. Admitting you made a hiring mistake demonstrates accountability. Admitting you don't know basic job requirements undermines confidence. Brené Brown's research shows leaders who model appropriate vulnerability see 76% improvement in team engagement within 6 months. Teams feel permission to bring forward problems, ask questions, and propose unconventional solutions when leaders demonstrate that imperfection is acceptable. Fear often stops leaders from experimenting with vulnerability. They worry about appearing weak or losing respect. The opposite happens. Teams distinguish between leaders who admit limitations honestly and those who fake competence. Authenticity builds credibility faster than pretending perfection ever could. Practice with specific scenarios. Acknowledge when you've changed your mind based on new information. Share a professional challenge you're working through and ask for team input. Admit when you don't have answers, but commit to finding them together. Each experiment teaches you what level of openness works for your team and culture. The most powerful vulnerability comes from demonstrating that you're still learning. When leaders position themselves as fellow travelers rather than arrived authorities, teams feel safe to admit their own growth areas and contribute more boldly to collective success. Part 3. 7 behaviors that create trust. Trust breaks down into 7 specific behaviors that you can observe, measure, and improve. Brené Brown's Braving Framework gives us a practical checklist that removes the mystery from building trust with teams. Boundaries means respecting what people say no to. When Netflix CEO Reed Hastings established keep or test conversations, He created clear boundaries around performance expectations. Leaders demonstrate boundaries by protecting team time from unnecessary meetings, honoring work-life limits, and saying no to requests that overload their people. A manager who tells their team, "I won't schedule meetings after 6 p.m.," and actually follows through builds boundary trust. Teams learn they can trust you to respect their limits when you consistently honor the boundaries you set together. Reliability shows up through small, consistent actions rather than grand gestures. Google's Project Aristotle found that teams with reliable leaders, those who consistently followed through on commitments, performed significantly better. This means doing what you say you'll do when you said you'd do it. If you promise feedback by Friday, deliver it by Friday. If you commit to investigating a team concern, actually investigate it. Reliability builds through accumulated evidence. Team members start trusting your word because your actions consistently match your promises. Accountability requires owning your mistakes publicly. When Satya Nadella became Microsoft's CEO, he openly admitted the company's mobile strategy failures and took responsibility for the missed opportunities. This modeling gave teams permission to acknowledge their own errors. Practice accountability by saying, "I made the wrong call on that project timeline." Instead of blaming external factors, when leaders admit mistakes without defensiveness, teams feel safer acknowledging their own missteps. Accountability creates learning opportunities instead of blame cycles. Vault means keeping confidences absolutely. Teams share sensitive information only when they trust it stays private. A leader honors Vault by never sharing what someone told them in confidence. Even in casual conversations, when team members know their private concerns won't become office gossip, they share more openly. This includes not repeating what one team member said about another, even when it seems harmless. Vault violations destroy trust faster than almost any other behavior because they signal that you can't be trusted with important information. Integrity involves choosing courage over comfort. Amazon's disagree and commit. Principle requires leaders to voice concerns even when it's uncomfortable. This might mean challenging a popular decision that doesn't feel right, or supporting an unpopular team member who's being treated unfairly. Integrity builds trust because teams learn you'll make difficult decisions based on principles rather than convenience. They trust that you'll protect them when it matters because you've demonstrated courage in smaller situations. Non-judgment responds to mistakes with curiosity instead of criticism. When Pixar's Ed Catmull implemented brain trust meetings, directors received feedback without fear of judgment. Instead of asking, "Why did you miss the deadline?" try, "What obstacles prevented you from meeting the deadline?" This slight shift removes defensiveness and encourages honest problem-solving. Non-judgmental responses make teams feel safe to bring up problems early rather than hiding them until they explode. Generosity assumes positive intent until proven otherwise. When someone misses a meeting, generous interpretation suggests they had a legitimate reason rather than assuming they don't care. This doesn't mean being naive, but giving people the benefit of the doubt in ambiguous situations. Teams work better when they're not constantly defending their motives. These behaviors reinforce each other. Non-judgment makes accountability safer. Vault strengthens vulnerability. Generosity supports reliability by assuming people want to follow through on commitments. Assess which behaviors your team needs most. Then, focus on improving one at a time rather than attempting all 7 simultaneously. Part 4. When trust breaks and how to fix it. Trust breaks eventually. Nobody talks about this uncomfortable truth, but every team will face moments when someone violates trust, sometimes catastrophically. Sarah, a product manager at a Fortune 500 company, discovered this during a quarterly review when her director publicly credited himself with her team's breakthrough innovation. The betrayal felt devastating because she had specifically shared the idea in confidence, seeking his guidance. Within weeks, team dynamics shifted completely. People stopped sharing innovative thoughts. Meetings became performative rather than collaborative. This scenario plays out daily in organizations worldwide. Trust violations happen through broken commitments, shared confidences that get repeated, credit stolen for others' work, mistakes blamed on innocent team members, and wildly inconsistent treatment of different people. The damage spreads quickly because trust operates like a bank account. Deposits take time, but withdrawals happen instantly. Most leaders handle trust breaks terribly. They minimize the damage, make excuses, or expect immediate forgiveness after hollow apologies. Research by behavioral economist Dan Ariely shows that trust repair requires 4 specific steps, executed in exact sequence. First, acknowledge the specific breach without defensiveness. Saying mistakes were made doesn't work. Sarah's director needed to say, "I took credit for your innovation in the quarterly meeting. I violated your trust by sharing something you told me in confidence and then claiming it as my own work." Second, take complete responsibility without excuse-making. No explanations about pressure from senior leadership or misunderstandings. Full ownership means accepting that impact matters more than intent. Third, make genuine amends through changed behavior, not just words. This means concrete actions that demonstrate commitment to different choices. Sarah's director could have corrected the record publicly, implemented new protocols for idea attribution, and consistently demonstrated improved behavior over months. Fourth, allow time for trust to rebuild through demonstrated consistency. Trust researcher Sandra Robinson found that trust repair typically requires 6 to 18 months of consistent positive behavior. Leaders who expect quick forgiveness after apologies actually damage trust further. Teams need established norms for addressing trust issues before they become toxic. High-performing teams create systems where trust violations get discussed immediately rather than festering. They distinguish between repairable breaches and fundamental character incompatibilities that require different interventions entirely. Trust is dynamic, requiring constant maintenance. Teams that successfully navigate trust repair often emerge stronger than before because they've proven they can handle difficult conversations. The goal isn't preventing all trust violations, it's building resilience to repair them effectively when they inevitably occur. Chapter 3. Creating Permission to Fail. Part 1. The 3 types of failure. Most organizations treat all failures the same way, with punishment, frustration, and demands that it never happens again. This one-size-fits-all response kills innovation while doing little to prevent actual carelessness. Harvard Business School's Amy Edmondson discovered that not all failures deserve identical treatment, and smart leaders learn to tell the difference. When Tata Group launched their innovation program, they created 3 distinct failure categories. A factory worker skipping safety protocols represented one type of failure. A software team's experimental algorithm that didn't work represented another. A hospital system breakdown during an unprecedented crisis represented a third. Each demanded completely different responses, yet most organizations would punish all 3 equally. Preventable failures happen when someone doesn't follow known procedures or makes careless mistakes. Think of a nurse giving the wrong medication because they skipped the double-check protocol, or an accountant making calculation errors because they rushed through familiar tasks. These failures stem from inattention or cutting corners on established processes. Organizations should minimize these through better training, clearer systems, and consistent accountability. When someone ignores safety procedures they know exist, consequences make sense. Complex failures emerge when multiple factors interact in novel ways that nobody fully anticipated. Consider the 2008 financial crisis, where housing market changes, regulatory gaps, and investment practices combined in ways that even experts didn't predict. These failures require investigation and learning, not blame. Teams face genuinely uncertain situations where existing procedures don't cover every scenario. The goal becomes understanding what happened and adapting systems accordingly. Intelligent failures result from thoughtful experiments designed to test new ideas or approaches. When Netflix tested their original content strategy, many shows failed completely. But these failures generated invaluable data about audience preferences and content creation. Intelligent failures should be celebrated because they represent exactly the kind of risk-taking that drives innovation. Punishing these experiments guarantees teams will stop taking the intelligent risks that fuel growth. The problem occurs when organizations apply preventable failure standards to experimental work. When teams get criticized for intelligent failures, they stop experimenting entirely. Innovation requires accepting that roughly half of thoughtful experiments won't work as expected. Companies that punish these productive failures find themselves stuck with safe, incremental improvements, while competitors race ahead through rapid experimentation cycles. Categorizing failures correctly changes everything. Preventable failures need process improvements and training. Complex failures require analysis and system adaptation. Intelligent failures deserve recognition and knowledge capture. This framework helps leaders eliminate carelessness while encouraging the productive risk-taking that drives innovation forward. Part 2. Making mistakes discussable. The moment a team member admits to a mistake determines whether your team becomes a learning powerhouse or stays trapped in dangerous silence. The conversation that follows a disclosed error shapes your team's future behavior more than any policy manual ever could. When Netflix engineers accidentally deleted customer data in 2008, CEO Reed Hastings could have erupted in anger and demanded heads to roll. Instead, he gathered the team and asked a simple question: what can we learn from this? That response transformed Netflix's culture into one where engineers proactively share potential problems before they become disasters. Your reaction in those first 30 seconds after hearing about a mistake sends a signal that reverberates through your team for months. Research from Harvard Business School shows that teams whose leaders respond with curiosity rather than criticism make 67% fewer repeated mistakes. The reason is simple. When people expect punishment, they hide problems until they explode into bigger crises. Creating forums where mistakes feel safe to discuss requires intentional design. At Toyota, every assembly line worker can stop production when they spot a problem. And managers respond by asking, "What did the system fail to catch?" rather than "Who messed up?" This approach has made Toyota one of the most reliable car manufacturers in the world. Start your next team meeting by sharing one of your own recent mistakes. Describe what you learned and what you changed as a result. This simple act gives your team permission to be human and demonstrates that learning from errors is more valuable than pretending perfection exists. The language you use when mistakes surface matters enormously. Instead of asking, "Why did you do that?" try, "What factors led to this outcome?" The first question triggers defensiveness and shame. The second opens space for honest analysis of contributing systems, unclear instructions, or competing priorities that set someone up to fail. Blameless postmortems have become standard practice in technology companies because they work. Amazon's approach focuses on timeline reconstruction and system improvements rather than individual fault finding. Their incident reports ask questions like, "What monitoring could have caught this earlier?" and "How can we prevent this class of error?" This systematic approach has dramatically reduced their outage frequency while encouraging rapid innovation. Recognition systems should reward transparency about failures, not just successes. When teams know they'll be thanked for early problem identification, they become your early warning system instead of hoping issues disappear on their own. Part 3. From blame to learning. Most organizations treat failure like a crime scene, searching for someone to blame rather than something to learn from. This instinctive response creates exactly the behavior they're trying to prevent. When mistakes happen, traditional accountability practices kick into high gear. Performance reviews dock points for errors. Managers publicly call out mistakes in meetings. Leaders immediately ask, "Who did this?" instead of "What happened?" These responses feel logical but create dangerous unintended consequences. Southwest Airlines discovered this the hard way in their early years. When flights were delayed, supervisors would identify the responsible employee and document the incident for performance reviews. The result? Ground crews stopped reporting potential problems until they became actual disasters. Mechanics avoided flagging questionable maintenance issues. Gate agents delayed notifying operations about passenger complications until flights were already late. The airline's breakthrough came when they shifted from blame-seeking to learning-focused responses. Instead of asking, "Who caused the delay?" they began asking, "What factors contributed to this situation?" This simple change in questioning revealed systemic issues invisible under blame-based investigation. Most failures involve system factors rather than individual incompetence. Consider the 2003 Columbia shuttle disaster. Initial investigations focused on foam debris hitting the wing during launch. But deeper analysis revealed organizational factors that prevented engineers from voicing safety concerns. Schedules created pressure to minimize problems. Communication channels made it difficult for lower-level staff to raise issues with senior leadership. The Just Culture framework, pioneered in aviation and healthcare, provides a better approach. It distinguishes between three types of accountability. Human error deserves support and system improvement. At-risk behavior requires coaching and barrier removal. Reckless behavior warrants discipline, but only after examining what organizational factors might have influenced the choice. Netflix exemplifies this approach in their engineering culture. When production systems fail, their first response is timeline reconstruction, not person identification. They ask what monitoring could have detected the issue earlier, what processes could prevent similar failures, and what organizational factors contributed to the breakdown. This systematic approach breaks the vicious cycle where fear leads to hiding prevents learning, and lack of learning causes repeated failures. When teams know investigation focuses on improvement rather than punishment, they become early warning systems instead of hoping problems disappear. The question isn't whether to hold people accountable, but how to do it while preserving learning and future problem solving. Part 4. Rewarding the right kind of wrong. Smart people stay quiet when getting things wrong feels dangerous. Organizations often celebrate the quarterback who throws touchdown passes, but rarely honor the coach who calls the play that doesn't work, but teaches everyone something valuable about the defense. Consider how Tata Group approaches failure recognition. The company created the Dare to Try Awards specifically to celebrate bold attempts that didn't succeed. When Tata Nano, their ambitious ultra-affordable car, failed commercially, leadership didn't hide the project or quietly reassign the team. Instead, they publicly examined what the failure taught about manufacturing, consumer preferences, and market timing. This response sent a clear message that thoughtful risks matter more than perfect outcomes. The problem with most reward systems is simple. They punish the very behavior they claim to want. When promotion decisions focus purely on successful projects, rational employees avoid experiments that might fail. Netflix learned this lesson while transitioning from DVD by mail to streaming. Early streaming experiments failed frequently, but the company created recognition programs for teams that generated useful learning from failed pilots, rather than just successful launches. Why does this matter? Because innovation requires a high failure rate. Amazon's Jeff Bezos calculated that successful innovation demands accepting 10 failures for every major breakthrough. Yet most organizations reward only the breakthrough, making the 9 necessary failures feel like career-limiting moves. Creating failure-positive recognition requires specific practices. 3M implemented graceful failure forums, where teams present failures that generated valuable learning to senior leadership. These presentations follow the same format as success stories, with detailed analysis of what was learned and how the knowledge applies to future projects. The key insight is treating intelligent failures as completed work rather than abandoned efforts. Google's X division takes this further by actually rewarding teams for killing their own projects when evidence suggests continuation makes little sense. Teams receive bonuses for recognizing when their moonshot experiments should end, rather than continuing expensive projects hoping for eventual success. This approach encourages teams to gather evidence quickly and make honest assessments. The concern many leaders raise is whether celebrating failure lowers standards. Research from IDEO suggests the opposite occurs. Teams that openly discuss and learn from failures develop better judgment about which risks are worth taking. They become more selective about experiments while more confident about pursuing promising opportunities. What gets recognized gets repeated. When organizations only celebrate successful outcomes, they get fewer experiments and slower learning. When they recognize thoughtful failures alongside successes, they accelerate the learning cycles that eventually produce breakthrough innovations. Chapter 4: The 4 Stages of Speaking Up. Part 1. Stage 1. Everyone belongs here. Most teams struggle with invisible walls that keep smart people silent, even when breakthrough ideas live right beneath the surface. Picture a new software engineer joining Google's Chrome team. During her first week, she notices something odd about the browser's memory usage, but stays quiet during technical meetings. The veterans throw around inside jokes about past product launches, while discussing complex architecture decisions she doesn't fully grasp. When someone mentions the incident from last year, everyone nods knowingly except her. She understands the code, but she doesn't understand the tribe. This scenario reveals the foundation problem that Timothy Clark identified in his research on psychological safety. Before anyone will risk learning, contributing, or challenging ideas, they must first feel they belong. Clark calls this inclusion safety, the basic human need to feel accepted as a valuable team member, regardless of role, background, or tenure. Consider what happened at Patagonia when they deliberately restructured their hiring process. Instead of relying on cultural fit assessments that often favor people similar to existing employees, they created structured onboarding and explicitly teaches company norms to everyone. New hires learn not just job requirements, but also unwritten rules about communication styles, decision-making processes, and even how informal conversations happen. The engineering team at Buffer discovered this challenge when they realized their daily stand-ups excluded remote workers from casual pre-meeting chatter, where important context often emerged. Simple solution? They moved all informal discussion into Slack channels everyone could access. Productivity jumped because suddenly everyone had the same information foundation. But inclusion goes deeper than access to information. Research from Catalyst shows that feeling excluded triggers the same brain regions as physical pain. When someone feels like an outsider, their cognitive resources shift towards social survival instead of creative thinking. This explains why diverse teams often underperform homogeneous ones despite having broader perspectives. Diversity without inclusion actually hurts performance. Smart leaders recognize subtle exclusion patterns. At Atlassian, managers noticed that newer team members rarely spoke during retrospectives, while veterans dominated discussions. Their fix was elegant. They implemented round-robin formats where everyone shares one observation before open discussion begins. This simple change revealed insights that senior developers had missed for months. The payoff extends beyond fairness. McKinsey's research demonstrates that inclusive teams make better decisions 70% of the time compared to individual decision makers. But this advantage only materializes when every person feels safe contributing their distinct viewpoint, making inclusion safety the gateway to leveraging team diversity. Part 2. Stage 2. Questions are welcome. The real test comes when confusion creeps into those polished team meetings, where everyone nods knowingly at complex explanations. Creating learner safety means making questions feel normal, not embarrassing. Think about it this way. Most teams accidentally punish the very curiosity that drives their success. When Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella transformed the company culture in 2014, he started with a simple practice. He began every leadership meeting by asking genuine questions about things he didn't understand, publicly admitting when concepts confused him. This single behavior change gave everyone else permission to do the same. The problem with high-performing teams is that everyone looks competent all the time. Sarah Blakely, founder of Spanx, noticed this pattern when her product development meetings became echo chambers. Engineers nodded at marketing presentations they didn't grasp, while marketers pretended to understand technical constraints they found baffling. Her solution was brutal in its simplicity. She instituted a confusion corner, where team members could anonymously submit questions about anything discussed in meetings. The results were immediate. Product development cycles shortened because real understanding replaced polite pretending. But here's what most leaders miss. How you respond to the first question determines whether anyone asks a second. When someone finally works up courage to say, "I don't understand this part," your next 30 seconds shape your team's learning culture for months. Amy Edmondson's research at Harvard shows that teams where leaders respond to questions with curiosity rather than impatience develop 47% more innovative solutions. Google's Project Aristotle discovered something surprising about their highest-performing teams. They weren't the smartest groups or those with the most experienced engineers. They were teams where people regularly admitted what they didn't know and asked for help without apologizing. These teams had normalized not knowing as the starting point for shared discovery. The mechanics matter more than the mindset. Build wait time into explanations. When you finish describing something complex, count to 10 before moving forward. Explicitly ask for clarifying questions. When someone asks one, thank them before answering. Most importantly, model uncertainty yourself. Share your own confusion about industry changes or new technologies. Your willingness to learn publicly gives everyone else permission to do the same. Part 3. Stage 3. Your ideas matter. Now the real work begins. Getting people to share their ideas feels like asking them to strip down in public and ask for feedback on their body. The risk feels enormous because ideas come from inside us. When someone shoots down your suggestion, it feels personal in ways that answering a question never does. Netflix discovered this firsthand when they tried to improve their recommendation algorithm in 2009. The company had brilliant engineers who asked great questions and learned constantly. But when it came to suggesting improvements to the core system, only senior architects spoke up. The company was missing out on insights from newer engineers who understood user behavior patterns differently. Their breakthrough came when they separated idea generation from idea evaluation completely. Instead of the traditional approach where someone suggests an idea and others immediately critique it, Netflix instituted build first, critique later sessions. Team members would spend 30 minutes expanding on each idea before anyone was allowed to point out flaws. A junior engineer's suggestion about user interface changes, initially dismissed by seniors, became the foundation for a major recommendation improvement after the team built on it collaboratively. The pattern Netflix discovered holds across industries. Ideas feel vulnerable because they represent our thinking made visible. Unlike questions, which show what we want to know, ideas reveal how we see solutions. When teams jump straight to criticism, contributors retreat. But when teams build on ideas first, people offer more of them. Consider how Pixar handles story development. Directors don't present finished concepts and defend them against attack. Instead, they share rough ideas, knowing the entire creative team will spend hours expanding, modifying, and improving them before anyone evaluates whether they work. This approach has produced billion-dollar franchises from initial concepts that would have sounded terrible if judged immediately. The mechanics matter enormously here. When someone offers an idea, resist the immediate urge to explain why it won't work. Instead, ask, "What would it look like if we did this?" Or how might we build on this thought? Even ideas that ultimately don't work often contain insights that spark better solutions. Most teams accidentally punish contribution by making idea sharing feel like defending a thesis. Smart people learn quickly to only suggest ideas they're confident will survive criticism intact. This eliminates the experimental thinking that drives innovation. Part 4. Stage 4. Challenge everything. Stage 4. Challenge everything. When Reed Hastings asked his senior team at Netflix to argue against his own strategic decisions, something remarkable happened. Executives who normally nodded politely began pointing out genuine flaws in his reasoning. This wasn't insubordination, it was challenger safety in action. Challenger safety represents the highest level of psychological safety. Here, team members feel secure questioning fundamental assumptions, pushing back on leadership, and proposing radical departures from current practice. This stage feels dangerous because it directly challenges power structures and established ways of thinking. Most organizations never reach this level. Success breeds confidence, and confidence breeds resistance to challenge. Kodak's engineers knew digital photography would disrupt film, but leadership couldn't hear warnings that contradicted their profitable business model. Similar patterns destroyed Blockbuster, BlackBerry, and countless other companies that stopped listening to internal dissent. The paradox runs deeper than comfort. Successful teams often lose challenger safety precisely because they're succeeding. Why question what's working? Yet this creates what researchers call competency traps. Organizations become so good at current approaches, they can't adapt when conditions change. Building challenger safety requires deliberate structure. At Amazon, Jeff Bezos instituted disagree and commit meetings, where team members must argue against proposed decisions before implementation. Google's Project Aristotle found that teams with challenger safety consistently outperformed those without it, even when individual members were less talented. The key lies in separating productive challenge from destructive opposition. Productive challenge focuses on improving outcomes, offers alternative approaches, and maintains respect for people while questioning ideas. Destructive challenge attacks individuals, offers only criticism without solutions, or undermines authority without regard for consequences. Leaders must model receptiveness to challenge without abandoning their authority. When Satya Nadella became Microsoft's CEO, he publicly admitted past strategic mistakes and invited criticism of current directions. This signaled that challenging leadership was valuable rather than career-limiting. Challenger safety doesn't create chaos, it prevents it. Teams with strong challenger safety catch problems before they become catastrophes, adapt faster to changing conditions, and avoid the groupthink that destroys even brilliant organizations. However, this final stage only works when inclusion, learner, and contributor safety provide the foundation. Without that trust, challenges feel like attacks rather than gifts. Chapter 5. Leading the Fearless Team. Part 1. Small actions that signal safety. Your team watches everything you do. They notice when you check your phone while someone talks. They see your face change when bad news arrives. They hear the questions you ask after mistakes happen. These tiny moments matter more than company-wide safety initiatives. Think about how you start meetings. Most leaders jump straight into agendas. But Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn discovered something powerful when he began each meeting with a simple question. What's one thing we should discuss that might be uncomfortable? This 30-second opener transformed team dynamics because it signaled that difficult topics belonged in the room. Your response to the first person who speaks sets the tone for everyone else. When someone shares an idea, do you immediately build on it or poke holes? Google's Project Aristotle found that teams performed best when leaders asked follow-up questions before offering opinions. Try saying, "Tell me more about that," before sharing your thoughts. How you handle mistakes reveals your true values. When Netflix CEO Reed Hastings learned about a major technical error, he publicly thanked the engineer who reported it, during the next all-hands meeting. This single action encouraged thousands of employees to surface problems early instead of hiding them. Watch your body language closely. Harvard Business School research shows that leaders who lean forward and make eye contact when receiving bad news create more psychological safety than those who fold their arms or look away. Your posture speaks louder than your words about whether input is truly welcome. Create visible decision-making processes. When Satya Nadella became Microsoft's CEO, he started explaining his reasoning out loud during leadership meetings. He would say things like, "I'm uncertain about this approach, so I need everyone's honest assessment." This transparency made it safe for others to express doubt. The magic happens in small, repeated actions rather than grand gestures. Pausing 3 seconds before responding to criticism. Saying, "I made an error," instead of "mistakes were made." Thanking people specifically for raising concerns. These micro-behaviors compound over time. Most safety-destroying actions happen unconsciously through habits. Record yourself in meetings for a week. You'll discover surprising patterns about when you interrupt, when your tone shifts, and when you stop asking questions. Part 2. Difficult conversations done right. When Satya Nadella became Microsoft's CEO in 2014, he faced a company where difficult conversations never happened. Employees described a culture where raising concerns meant career suicide. The transformation required leaders to fundamentally change how they approached tough discussions. Most leaders avoid difficult conversations because they think psychological safety means keeping everyone comfortable. This creates a dangerous paradox. When problems fester unaddressed, teams actually feel less safe because they sense underlying tensions without understanding them. Uncertainty breeds more anxiety than honest feedback ever could. Netflix provides a compelling contrast. Their keeper test conversations happen regularly between managers and employees. The question is simple. If this person wanted to leave, would I fight to keep them? If the answer is no, an honest conversation follows immediately. This might sound harsh, but Netflix employees report feeling safer knowing exactly where they stand, rather than wondering about their performance in silence. The key lies in preparation and intention. Before entering any difficult conversation, separate what you observed from what you interpreted. When an employee misses deadlines, saying "you seem uncommitted" reflects your interpretation. Saying "I noticed 3 deadlines missed this month" states observable facts. This distinction prevents conversations from becoming character assassinations. Structure your approach around curiosity rather than judgment. Instead of "why are you always late to meetings?" try "I've noticed you've joined our last 4 meetings after they started. Help me understand what's happening." This framing invites explanation rather than defensiveness. The biggest mistake is the feedback sandwich: praise, criticism, praise. Research from the Center for Creative Leadership shows this approach confuses the message completely. Recipients remember the positive comments and miss the critical feedback entirely. Direct honesty, delivered with respect, proves far more effective. Timing matters enormously. Surprises destroy trust. If performance issues exist, address them when they surface, rather than saving them for annual reviews. Google's Project Aristotle found that teams perform better when feedback flows continuously, rather than in formal intervals. Consider systemic issues versus individual performance problems. When multiple people struggle with the same challenge, the system needs fixing, not the people. Leaders who distinguish between these scenarios avoid unfairly targeting individuals for organizational failures. Psychological safety doesn't mean avoiding discomfort. It means approaching discomfort with genuine developmental intent rather than punishment. Teams that master difficult conversations actually report higher satisfaction and trust levels than those that avoid them entirely. Part 3. When leaders get it wrong. Even the most committed leaders make mistakes that damage psychological safety. When Netflix CEO Reed Hastings publicly criticized his engineering team's performance during a company meeting, employees later reported feeling afraid to share technical concerns for months afterward. His eventual acknowledgement of this misstep and changed approach actually strengthened team trust more than if he had never erred at all. Leaders commonly derail psychological safety through predictable patterns. Defensive reactions to challenging questions signal that curiosity isn't truly welcome. Showing visible frustration when someone admits a mistake teaches team members to hide problems. Moving quickly past someone's concern communicates that their input lacks value. Playing favorites in recognizing contributions tells others their efforts matter less. The repair process begins with explicit acknowledgement. When Satya Nadella took over Microsoft, he openly admitted his defensive response to a question about women's advancement had been wrong. He didn't minimize the impact or make excuses. This direct ownership modeled the behavior he wanted throughout the organization. Effective repair requires three components. First, acknowledge the specific behavior that damaged safety without deflecting responsibility. Second, explain what you'll do differently going forward with concrete examples. Third, demonstrate changed behavior consistently over time. Words alone never rebuild trust that actions destroyed. Creating feedback channels helps leaders catch their mistakes before permanent damage occurs. Some teams establish safety checks where members can anonymously signal when leadership responses have shut down openness. Others designate rotating roles for team members to observe and report on psychological safety dynamics during meetings. Leaders need self-awareness about their trigger situations. Do you get defensive when questioned about decisions you're proud of? Do technical discussions bring out your impatience? Does criticism from senior stakeholders make you less receptive to team input? Identifying these patterns enables proactive management rather than reactive damage control. The strongest teams actually experience more trust after leaders acknowledge and repair their mistakes. Team members see that imperfection is acceptable and that relationships can withstand difficult moments. This modeling creates permission for everyone to be human, while maintaining accountability for improvement. Part 4. Keeping safety alive as you grow. Psychological safety doesn't magically maintain itself once you've built it. Like a garden, it requires constant attention, especially when your team starts changing and growing. Reed Hastings learned this lesson the hard way at Netflix. In the early days, the company's small founding team felt comfortable challenging each other's ideas. Everyone knew each other personally. Trust was high. And difficult conversations happened naturally. But as Netflix added hundreds of new employees, something shifted. The original team members started staying quiet in larger meetings. New hires felt intimidated to speak up around the founders. What once felt like a tight-knit family began feeling like a corporate hierarchy. The problem wasn't intentional. Growth naturally creates distance. When your team goes from 8 people to 80, the dynamics fundamentally change. That intimate breakfast table conversation where everyone felt heard becomes a conference room where only the loudest voices dominate. New people don't understand the unwritten rules about speaking up. They watch and wait, trying to figure out what's really acceptable. Amy Edmondson's research at Harvard identifies specific warning signs that safety is eroding. Meeting participation becomes uneven, with the same people always speaking first. Problem reporting drops off as people avoid being the bearer of bad news. Innovation suggestions slow down. Most telling, your best performers start looking elsewhere for opportunities. The key is building systems that don't depend on you personally. At Pixar, they institutionalized brain trust meetings where anyone can critique ongoing projects without fear of retaliation. The rules are explicit. Focus on the project, not the person. Be specific about problems. Offer solutions when possible. This approach survived major leadership transitions because the process, not individual personalities, created safety. Creating distributed ownership matters more than charismatic leadership. Train team members to facilitate safety conversations. Rotate who leads retrospectives. Ask different people to summarize meeting discussions, ensuring quieter voices get heard. When safety becomes everyone's responsibility, it survives organizational turbulence. Monitor the subtle indicators religiously. Track who speaks in meetings over time. Notice if the same people always raise concerns or if problem reports cluster around certain team members. Pay attention during stressful periods, like product launches or budget cuts, when safety typically erodes first. During major transitions, safety requires extra attention. When teams reorganize or new leaders arrive, people naturally become more cautious. They're unsure what the new normal will be. Be explicit about safety expectations during these moments. Have conversations about what will change and what won't. Make it clear that speaking up remains valued even when everything else feels uncertain. Building safety into your hiring and onboarding process creates lasting protection. Explain psychological safety expectations to new team members explicitly. Share stories about how the team handles mistakes and disagreements. Give new hires specific examples of what good contribution looks like. Don't assume they'll figure it out by watching. The strongest teams treat safety as a renewable resource, not a one-time achievement.